Well, hello and hi to all my vintage dirt bike loving YouTubers, and thanks once again for returning to my increasingly popular classic dirt bike TV channel. Now in my next featured clip, this is a bike I captured at the Revival Scramble a couple of years back, and it's a very rare and iconic machine. So stay with me for the next few minutes as we check out Swedish motocross star Ove Lundell's 500cc Monark race bike. Now, Ove Lundell was born in 1930 in Moklinta in Sweden. Now, his career began at the age of 15 when he performed at Swedish circuses, where he rode the Wall of Death carnival sideshows on an old Indian motorcycle. Now, during the 1950s and 1960s, Lundell worked for the Monark factory race team. Now, Lundell also won Swedish Motocross National Championships in 1955, 58 and 1960, and was a member of the victorious Swedish Motocross the Nations teams in 1958, 1961 and 1962. Now, Lundell won his first and only World Motocross Championship on June the 30th, 1963 at the 500cc Russian Grand Prix. Now, Monark motorcycles started in Sweden in 1908 by Birger Svensson. Now, they, like many other motorcycle companies of the time, started out making road bikes, but later tapped into the motocross motorcycle market. Now, during World War II, Monark supplied the Swedish military with 500cc bikes that used the Albin 4-stroke engines. And once the war was over, they went back to making smaller 50cc and 250cc powered 2-stroke bikes and became Sweden's largest motorcycle producer. Now, these Monarchs used the 498cc Albin engine, which was originally developed for the Swedish Army in 1942. Now, the Albin engine was simple, reliable and quite slim. And behind the scenes at Albin was, of course, Niels Olof Hedlund, who was a master engine builder and former road racer, whose influence on 4-stroke engine design would later culminate in his own production 500cc racing motor. Now, Hedlund mated the Albin top end to a BSA Gold Star transmission, and Hedlund would become a major player in the success of Monark, Lito and even Husqvarna. Now, they only built a total of 5 of these Monark GP works bikes from 1957 to 1960, and of course this is Ove Lundell's personal machine, which is now owned by Englishman Peter Lockwood. Now, as you can see here, the brakes do not look very substantial for a 500cc motocross machine. In fact, they look almost bicycle-like, and it's hard to imagine that this very small little drum would ever slow down a big 500cc single such as this big Swedish made Monark. Now, because they made such a small amount of these Monark race bikes, as these bikes were used and often abused, the parts from the original bikes were taken off and then used on newer bikes. Now, each bike was individually designed by Monark, and no two bikes were exactly the same. Now, of course, none of these bikes were ever sold to the public, and all the surviving examples are still accounted for today. So there will never ever be a barn find of a Monark 500, and if one was to be found, it would be worth a very substantial amount of money. Now, the Monark engine was, of course, a 500cc long stroking 4-stroke motor, with a bore of 79 millimeters and a stroke of 100 millimeters. Now normally these engines would be fitted with an AMAL monoblock carburetor, but in this particular case this bike is fitted with an AMAL concentric unit. Now the ignition was by Lucas Magneto, and these bikes also had a dry sump, of course, with the oil contained in this little aluminium box you see at the rear of the cylinder. The oil tank is on the bottom, with the alloy airbox for the carburetor sitting on top. Now they also had dry clutches, of course, with these BSA Gold Star gearboxes. And actually when you look at this particular motor, it's not unlike the old British BSA Gold Star. It's quite similar in certain ways. Now of course this is Ove Lundell's old race bike, and as far as I'm aware there hasn't been many parts on this bike being changed since Peter took possession of this wonderful old classic racer. Now, as I mentioned, a dry clutch on this engine, with a chain of course connecting the crankshaft to the gearbox. A BSA Gold Star gearbox there, and you can just about see the oil feed pipes from the oil tank going into the crankcases. Alloy fuel tank, of course, with that lovely leather belt securing device for bolting the tank down onto the frame. Of course, this fastening system is not unlike many of the old CZs of the time, which used these old leather straps to secure the tank down onto the frame. But it certainly has a bit of history, this Ove Lundell Monarch 500, and Peter has certainly secured himself a piece of motocross history by owning this wonderful machine. And with very little of these machines ever made, with just a handful of machines, it's not surprising that you don't see these kind of machines out on the racetrack, due mainly to their rarity. And we were very lucky to have come across this particular example at the 2018 Revival Scramble. Nevertheless, it's a gorgeous looking bike with this blue frame and that big massive 500cc Monarch single cylinder motor, and you can just imagine what this bike sounds like through that straight through open exhaust system, although unfortunately on the day I never had the chance to get Peter to fire the bike up. Nevertheless, it's a genuine old race bike, and with having the provenance of Swedish motocross star Ove Lundell's history with this bike, you can understand why it's such a very rare and iconic machine. So there you have it, a very rare machine indeed. Swedish motocross star Ove Lundell's lovely 500cc Monarch. Okay, coming up on my YouTube channel very soon will be all the glitz and glamour from the 2020 Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show. So if you can't make the show this year, then please stay tuned to my YouTube channel, where you can see every single bike from the show. This video was brought to you in association with WorldSport, the world's #1 supplier for all your off-road and leisure sportswear. Just visit their online website for more information.